All right, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We're on another fun and creative episode with a very talented creative person as well. But this time it's a podcast, so it's even better. So, woohoo. Um, I was on a show a few weeks ago, and I had a blast. I had a fun time. He has a batch of great guests, and he's just starting his journey into podcasting from the Patreon podcast, which is patreonpodcast.com. We're joined today by Chris Cowan. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm super stoked to be on this show. I had an awesome time having you on my show, so it's great to be switching seats and seeing things from this angle. So thanks for having me.
A bit of a give and take there, Gotta love that type of stuff. The networking that can be done on a podcast, it's crazy. I know.
Yeah.
Um, well, let's talk about yourself here, because that's what we're here for. Because
good. That's my favorite subject. So
yeah, it's a good subject. A good subject to have, actually. For those that don't know about Patreon podcast that didn't happen to listen to my interview, which I'll be really disappointed if they didn't, tell us what it's all about.
Well, it's basically Patreon, for those who don't know, is kind of like Kickstarter, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a crowdfunding website where basically you can tell people, I'm doing this project on an ongoing basis, and if you like what I'm doing, which I'm offering it for free, you can support me and maybe even get a few kind of thank you incentives along the way and help me reach some of my goals for this particular project. And so that's what Patreon is. And so Patreon Podcast is an unofficial podcast about, but more specifically, it's about the people who behind the projects. And basically what I do is each episode is an interview with somebody who's got their project up on Patreon, and I talk to them about them personally. I talk to them about their creative process, get to find out about their project, and then of course we talk about their Patreon page, their Patreon campaign as well. And so far I've recorded 8 episodes, and it's been a total blast. I'm meeting all kinds of neat people, including you, Kurt, and I'm having a blast doing it.
Well, that's good. That's good. What are some of your goals for being a new podcast interviewer, and for your show, for that
matter? That's a tricky one. I mean, I have obviously I like the idea of reaching more people. I love the idea of getting to network with creative people, because for my part, I thrive on creativity, and almost equally as much as I thrive on like exploring different creative venues, I love connecting with other creative people, and I love the community that tends to surround that idea of a bunch of people are really into this particular thing, and I love the idea of connecting with those people and being part of that community. Ultimately, my goal is just to kind of, I guess, bring some of that community to the Patreon space. Help people who are interested in either Patreon or just in who, like me, get excited about and inspired by other creative people, and like you, Kurt, finding the kind of that camaraderie, and I think podcasts are a great way to do that. And also, ultimately, I mean, I love podcasting. It's tons of fun, and that's to me the ultimate thing is I'm having a blast doing it. So no matter whether it gets anywhere or not, that's what I'm coming away with.
Nice, good stuff. Well, what was your first podcast you ever listened to before you even got to being? We'll talk about technical stuff afterwards, but what was your very first podcast where you listened to it and you were like, "What's a podcast?" And then you're like, "Oh, wow, that's pretty cool."
Let's see. Well, I got into listening to podcasts in, I think, like 2006. It was basically around the time Apple really started supporting podcasts on the iTunes Store and GarageBand and with iWeb and all that stuff. They really made it really easy for people who just want to listen, and for people who actually wanted to be creating content to do that. So I got into listening to podcasts, and I think the first one. Are you familiar at all with Knox's Corner or Robert Benfer or Clay World or anything like that?
Clay World sounds familiar to me.
Okay, so there was this. Basically, it was some kid, like some high school kid, doing claymation animations, and it was basically just these lumpy blue clay guys with no distinct, facial features or anything, and they would just act dumb and get into trouble, and just half of them would end up dying basically by the end of the animation short. Anyway, so he was doing stuff like that, and then there's another guy named I forget his name, but he was doing videos under the name of Film Cow, and he still does that and still releases those videos as a podcast. And anyways, the two of them were actually friends, and they started doing an audio podcast together where they would basically just do whatever they wanted for an hour on audio. And so they already had a following, and so I guess that's how I found them, and so that was probably the first one I listened to, and I've listened to others since then. Nobody's Listening is one of the earliest ones I listened to, which is basically a funny story podcast, and now I'm friends with the guy who did that, and so those are the two that come to mind.
Nice. Did you have a mentor when you first started your foray into podcasting?
No, I didn't, and so because I started podcasting with just kind of based off of that Robert Benfer and I can't remember his other name, but their podcast. I kind of started based on their model, which was do whatever you want for an hour with a couple friends and just talk about whatever you want to talk about and just be stupid. So I made basically all the mistakes any amateur podcaster could possibly make. I wasn't consistent. I was basically, if I recorded, wasn't releasing on a regular basis. I wasn't, recording on a regular basis. I'd record like two, a day after the other, and then nothing for a couple weeks, and just all the mistakes. No real consistency in the content. Just all the mistakes you could possibly make.
Oh yes, and technology failing on you, or not recording properly, or the person you're speaking with, can't hear you properly, and feedback, and no, you're giving me the flashbacks from when I first started.
And I started. It was me and my brother-in-law who still does a podcast with me, a comedy podcast called Pop Mockers, and it was me and him and another guy, and we didn't, we had no budget. Everything we were using was basically free stuff that we could scrounge. The mics we were using were meant for PlayStation video games, so we were using. There's a video game called Karaoke Revolution,
mm-hmm.
and then another one called Get on da Mic, which was like a rap game where you would have to rap, and they were just like the cheapest mics you could possibly get, and that's what we were using for podcasting. And I've actually gone back and listened to a couple of them, and it hurts like my soul to listen to those because they're so terrible in every way.
Oh, it's painful. Yes, I had I had a friend of mine was moving to Hong Kong, and he gave me his desktop microphone. One of those cheesy Logitech ones that kind of like sit on a very flimsy base, and it has that little curve. Yeah, that's what I was using for a little bit, and then I picked up a small headset microphone attachment that I was using for video game for WoW and stuff like that, and that was slightly better quality. And then I found out it was my software and hardware. Hardware makes a huge difference when it comes to putting together a podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Built-in video cards do not work well when it comes to podcasts, especially
Not so,
nowadays.
not so much. No.
So what about yourself? What type of equipment? Now, from those cheap microphones to what type of equipment are you running nowadays?
Well, obviously, the one I'm most proud of is this sucker right here. It's the RE20 microphone. This is a broadcast quality mic, and it's used by radio professionals and all that kind of stuff. I purchased it after I had some other mics that were pretty decent quality that I'd kind of inherited inadvertently. But I really wanted to kind of this year I wanted to step up my podcasting game, and so I bought this as sort of a birthday present to me, with my wife's approval, and I bought it knowing that okay, because the following month we were going to start doing the Dave Ramsey classes, financial, being smart financially, basically. So I'm like, okay, I'm taking Dave Ramsey classes next week. So if I'm going to do a stupid financial splurge, it's got to be now or never. So that's what I did, and hopefully it shows in the wonderful quality of my beautiful voice. So that's been kind of my major thing I'm proud of, and then I've over time I've gathered other equipment. I'm using a audio interface called the Tascam. What is this?
Tascam Podcaster.
It's the Tascam US600 interface, and it does the trick. I'm actually not using a legit mixer. It does the trick for now. I run 3 mics plus computer audio through it for my podcasts, and it handles it like a champ. So no complaints there. But at some point, that's kind of my next thing is I want to get a actual mixer.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. I need to get a mixer, and I have a Tascam board as well. I think it's the 502.
Okay, cool.
So it's the Benheiser, that German name 502. So it's a nice little thing. It does single or 2 mic output. That it's what I need for what I have. So it's all good. Plus I have a USB AT 2020 USB microphone that I used before this setup. So you use what you get, and you pay for the quality, and the one thing I really love is your camera. Your video camera is way better than what I have. So I may have to upgrade myself. So.
Well, thank you. This camera was like $20-something on Amazon. It's a Logitech. I don't know what. I'm not gonna mess with it, but it's what I found was you can find pretty good quality webcams for decent price. So
nice.
I'm a fan.
The HD is a beautiful touch, though. I mean, you see everything. You see all your pores. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm not sure you really want to see that much, but you're stuck with it. What you gonna do?
It's better quality than what I have here because I haven't turned on my shit. As a creative person, podcasting is something where you have to think on your feet, especially when it comes to various interviews. You can't always have the same standard questions every week, but sometimes you have to go back to the old fallbacks. What are some fallback questions you always try to touch upon?
Well, you're gonna put me in a tough spot now. Well, it's some of the main thing. One of the things I try to do is find out if there's a particular inspirational quote or something. And what people choose tends to be pretty revealing about kind of their mentality, their philosophy, and that kind of thing. And geez, I'm trying to options are, but it basically since we talk about Patreon, obviously there's a few questions I ask specifically about their Patreon page, because we're wanting to find out about what their milestones and incentives are. And then, I'll generally ask. Well, one thing I do as kind of a standard question that's like intentionally kind of. It's a terrible interview question because your interview questions are supposed to be like direct and specific and let me find out this little nugget. But I like confusing my interviewees. So I like to just ask, who are you? I just say I'm asking you the most generic, open-ended question possible. Who are you? And just see how they respond to that. And so far it's worked out okay. Nobody's gotten mad and left the interview midway because of it. So I figure it can't be that bad. So.
That's it. Table flip.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's good. And I'm sure as the years go on, you'll find other questions. You'll find a new style as well too. I mean,
yeah.
You're only going to constantly evolve with this, and it's a great show. It's definitely different. It's something that is a niche market in terms of Patreon. Everyone loves crowdfunding and kickstarting and everything along that line, and so at least you have a great focus in that regard, and you've had some really fun guests on too. I'm not just saying that because I was on the show. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, no, it's been a real blast, and it's definitely been a huge learning experience for me because I'm not used to doing an interview podcasts. I've never done interview podcasts, and it's definitely been, like you said, it's one of those things that's evolving. As I started, my first couple interviews felt a little more rigid. And one of them was because, if I were to do it over again, I probably would have scheduled the interviews a little bit differently. Because I started, my very first interview was with Ethan Nicole of Axe Cop and Bearmageddon.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of him, and I was stoked to nail down the interview. And if I were to do it again, I probably would have scheduled someone else first, done a couple warm-up interviews before I got to him, because it's, I was new to it. So there's things I would have done differently. I've definitely become a lot more comfortable in the past several episodes, just asking questions and kind of figuring out what my style and approach is, than I was, for that first interview. So,
yeah, that's really good that you got Axe Cop right off the bat. I mean, that's huge in that regard. I mean,
yeah.
No, that's amazing. But yeah, it's a learning experience. You're always improving yourself. I mean, for me, it was when I interviewed Max Brooks for my second interview ever in a convention circuit.
Oh wow!
And I butchered his name, so that was a learning experience.
Okay, how did you butcher his name? What did you?
I did my opening spiel, and then I said, "We're here today with Mark Brooks, Max Brooks," and he covers his book, and he goes, "Okay, you said three names. You said Mel, Mark, and Max. Which one am I?" And I go, "You're Max." He goes, "Good. Okay, Bob, what are you talking about now?" what questions you got for me? It's up on the YouTube page, but yeah, I've told that story many times. But it's one of those things that stick with you, where it's like, oh my God, how did I screw that up? And it's his name too, and then he's the son of Mel Brooks, and I'm like, wow, I feel like an ass.
Well, at least you self-corrected. If you'd actually let it continue, kept calling him Mark or something like that, that'd be embarrassing.
Just a bit, and which was kind of funny because I didn't realize this at the time, but George R. R. Martin was actually sitting around the corner from them too.
Oh wow! That's
and
crazy.
I walked by the old guy, and I'm like, yeah, I guess he's an author. I don't know what he's written.
He's just a nobody. Yeah.
He's just some guy, with a really long beard.
That's cool.
In what areas do you feel that you're most passionate about?
Let's see. Like specific to podcasting, or just kind of in general?
let's go with podcasting first, and then we'll see what if in general flows into that.
Okay. All right. I think honestly, the the collaboration, which for me, like, because I've been podcasting since 2006, with so basically my flagship podcast has been kind of different iterations of and different tweaks on the same kind of. It's a comedy podcast with three guys, and so the current iteration is called Pop Mockers. I mentioned, and that's always been tons of fun to do that because that's kind of my podcast where I get to just totally be utterly ridiculous with some of my best friends, and we're all ridiculous together, and we're all collaborating, and we're all together creating, content that is fun, at least for the people subscribing to it. There's people returning to every episode, so I'm like, hey, we're having fun, and at least some people are having fun listening to it. So that to me is really awesome. And I see that collaboration, throughout really all aspects of podcasting. I see that collaboration, obviously, with Patreon podcast. There's that collaborative element where getting to shoot the breeze. We're talking, and I try to keep it somewhat focused, but then also just being free to go down some of those rabbit trails, and just kind of creating and collaborating together. It's not just me; it's you and me creating this episode together. And then again, I had a video podcast I was doing for about a year and a half, give or take, called Bible News Network, which was basically pretty ambitious. It was basically a video news report, and we would be basically reporting on biblical events as if they were happening live, and we would be news reporters and reacting to it and interviewing.
That actually sounds pretty funny. I have to.
So,
was it meant to be comedy, or was it meant to be more of a serious take?
Oh no, it absolutely was comedy, and you can still see it at BibleNewsNetwork.com. And no, I should have pulled your leg, been like, we were taking it dead seriously, and I'm offended that you would. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was. It was. I mean, it was a total blast, and it was the biggest, most ambitious ongoing project I've ever done because there were tons of people involved. Tons of people came together to be, volunteered to be in the crew, to be in the cast. We had to write and script it. I had to do tons of post-production, which is why I kind of had to take a break because it just, for my schedule and my life, it just wasn't sustainable. But it's that, it's that those things where you're feeling inspired, and you're seeing all these other people coming together, and you're all working together, and the creativity is flowing, and there's those moments that happen, and that that's I think to me what I'm most passionate about in podcasting, and honestly, beyond. But so,
do you have a film background, or is this just something you decided? You know what? Let's give this a shot.
I don't have like a film background. I've always been into doing video projects and stuff, and so I'd done previous projects, just kind of a couple different episodes and of stuff, but this was definitely the most ambitious in terms of trying to do an ongoing thing and having a blast doing it. So.
Good stuff.
Basically, my answer to that question is no. I'm completely uneducated. So.
It's not that bad. I mean, come on. You're not uneducated. You just haven't quite, done, everything when it comes to film. That's all.
I'm neutral educated. How's that? I'm not pro-educated. I'm not uneducated. I'm just self-taught. really.
A self-taught amateur that did how many episodes?
Ah, geez. I think 17 or 18.
Holy jeez, that's not
Yeah.
an amateur. That's a hobbyist right there. Congratulations.
Yes, I made it to the next level. So,
How long were the episodes?
they varied generally around 5 to 8 minutes. Um,
No.
just with a lot of editing and special effects and post production, and I'm honestly proud of some of it, and some of it I'm kind of like, oh, I wish I could do that over again. But huge learning experience for sure.
No, and then that takes dedication. Now that's impressive to get however many people you had working consistently with you for 17 or 18 episodes for 5 minutes a shot. That's really well done. That's amazing. Congrats. I'm impressed.
Well, thank you. I consider myself really blessed with the relationships and friends that I have, and just there's, like I said, there's just some of those things you do where everything comes together, and this was definitely one of those things. So.
In what area of your life are you most creative and least creative?
Ooh, that's a that's a stumper. I'll have to think about that one. Most creative. Uh, that's hard to say because I have what I call creativity ADD, where I get super, I feel super excited about something, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I kind of let a bunch of creativity flow out for a little bit, and then I'm like, okay, phew, I got that out of my system. Oh, now I'm really excited about this. Creativity, creativity, creativity. Who got that out of my system? And so I kind of do that, and this year actually has been one of the things where I'm like, okay, enough with the creativity ADD. Let me just try focusing on one thing this year, and just see how far I can get if I'm just keeping my energy focused on that. And so it's podcasting, and which is something I've done for a while, but really putting a lot of energy and effort and focus onto that this year. In terms of least creative, oh, that's a tough one.
Welcome to the show. We ask tough questions every so
Yeah,
often.
no kidding. Gosh, oh man, I need like multiple choice on that one because I. How about least creative with answering questions about which area I'm least creative in? That's
Okay, fair enough. If you weren't podcasting, if you didn't have that creative ADD, what would you be doing with your life?
well, I'd if I didn't have the creative ADD, I would be I have a full-time job I do outside of my hobbies, as well as a wife and three boys. I have twin 5-year-olds and a 2-year-old. So honestly, all of those keep me pretty, pretty occupied as it is. So if I didn't have my creativity ADD and that kind of innate, I have to have my creative outlets. Then I'm the rest of my time would definitely be filled up with those two things alone. And I obviously I do obviously I have my job, and then I do my job is actually from home, which helps in terms of I don't have a commute, so when I get off work I don't have to spend a long time driving home, so that I think frees up time for family and that kind of thing. So I definitely outside of my creative hobbies and stuff, I spend a lot of time hanging out with my boys and my wife, and having fun. And one thing I'm seeing as my boys are growing is that we get to kind of share some of our creative passions together. my one of my 5-year-olds, Mason, is like he's like obsessed with drawing, and like that's what he does all day is he just draws for hours on end, and it's really funny because he knows, okay, I can't interrupt Dad while he's working or anything like that, but he draws pictures for me, and so throughout the day, instead of coming in to give me the picture, I'll just periodically through my door, I'll just see a sheet of paper that he drew on just kind of slide underneath the door, and then another one a few minutes later. And so by the end of the day, I've got just basically a stack of paper just spread across the floor of my office because he's just been sending me little, his little drawings and stuff. So
it's snail mail.
Exactly, yeah. So
that's good. It's great that you have a wonderful family life, and I'm sure your wife is extremely supportive of what you're doing and everything along that line, or else I doubt we'd be talking.
Yeah, no, she was very, very gracious to give me some my project day. She's very gracious. She's allowed me to have kind of a project day. Every Tuesday is my dedicated project day. So I get off work, and then that's when I'll knock out an interview for Patreon podcast. I'll do some web stuff that I need to do for my podcast websites, and then later that evening I get together with my two friends and we'll record our comedy podcast. And so that's been super gracious of her to give me that. And then obviously today we're recording this on a Monday, so she was gracious enough to give me some time to be on. Very, very thankful for my wife for allowing that.
Well, tell her thank you from a fellow podcaster and Canadian. So we appreciate it so much there, eh?
Yeah.
I gotta throw the stereotype in every so often,
Yeah, you gotta.
And here's my polar bear. Just saying. Moving on. Everyone kind of has that one or two people that kind of inspire them down their path to where they are today in their life. Who was that for you?
Well, okay. So if we just talk about podcasting, I think the biggest influence, and that would be James Kennison of Nobody's Listening. Has kind of always been indirectly a mentor to me, just because I've always enjoyed what he does, and he's always kind of I've seen a little bit of that creative ADD in him as well, but he's always done kind of a much better job of doing the right things from the get-go, and so I've been able to learn from watching what he does. And then Daniel J. Lewis is another one in terms of podcasting influence. He does a great how-to podcast kind of a podcast about podcasting called The Audacity to Podcast.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
Okay, yeah, and he's got tons of resources, and often when I'll find myself talking to other podcasters and who are asking for advice, and half the time I'm like, here's a link to something Daniel J. Lewis wrote, or here's a podcast he did that talks about exactly what you're talking about, and so in terms of podcasting specifically, those are definitely the two big influencers. If I broaden it, a little bit, just to maybe life in general, I'd have to say my dad has definitely been the big, our dads anybody's dad has an influence on them for sure, but my dad has definitely been someone in my life who's always been a role model. I'm incredibly thankful for just how he was actually he still is a pastor. So throughout my entire childhood, he was a pastor of a church and stuff. And I, it was one of those things where he was one of those people who actually did, practice what they preach, and he did a great job of raising, my family, and my parents had a really good relationship, and so I'm just thankful that I had amazing role models that I can kind of try to strive to and strive for that in life, because I don't know what my, what my point of reference would be if I didn't have that in my life growing up. So yeah.
Good, good. You've had, professionally, you have a wonderful job, a great family. You're doing wonderful in that regard. Plus, you're doing 3 podcasts or 2 podcasts. You're successful in that regard. But you consider yourself personally successful?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing with success is there's always that next level. I mean. There's always another level to strive for, and I think it's healthy to always have another level to strive for. And there's always going to be stuff in my professional life, and certainly in my podcasting and creative life, and in my personal and family life. There's always stuff where I'm like, oh, if only it was this way. But I mean, the bottom line for me is I've got so much to be thankful that, to me, yeah, I mean, I definitely consider myself successful. I don't have I don't have what I would consider an ideal amount of listeners and followers on my podcast at this point, but it's not, I consider it a success that anybody's bothering to listen to me. I mean, if there's just one person tuning in each week, that would, okay, that might be a little bit of a bummer. But the fact that somebody's, dedicating that, just even one person is dedicating that time to check it out is like wow, I'm doing enough to check it out. So the fact that I have more than that is definitely successful on some level.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
How do you deal with your failures?
I just ignore them, pretend they didn't happen, and then I sweep it under the rug a little bit. I mean, the bottom line with failures is you got to learn from them. If it's depending on the level of the failure, you just got to kind of in some cases it's a matter of needing to correct it, but the ultimate thing is okay, well, what are you taking away from these mistakes and applying them in the future? Like I said, when I started podcasting, there's a list of things you can do right, and there's a list of things you can do wrong, and I nailed the list of things you could do wrong. So, but I've learned since then, and that's, to me, the big thing is applying it going forward. That's what success is. It's what happens after you've learned from all those failures.
Good answer. Good answer. Well done. Golf clap all around. No, it was a good answer. The younger generation is looking towards your work as inspiration, which is always a good thing.
That's a scary thing.
Well, no, but your son is seeing your sons, I should say, are seeing you, and you're an inspirational role model, and like your father was for you, type deal. So it works out well in that regard. How can they, as the younger generation, inspire the generation that follows them?
Wow. It's Ah, geez. Well, I mean, I could go the specific route and be like, well, here's what's wrong with the current generation. So here's what you could do to fix it. Start with not being so entitled about everything. Uh, but
2 hours later, yep.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I could go on that rant. But, but I think I think it's with any generation when it comes to setting an example. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Is be that example that you want them to follow. It's a whole. You can preach all you want, but the people who are looking at you, it's not about what you say. It's about what you do, and if it's about what kind of life you're living and stuff. So if we're and if we're talking about creativity, and really just in general. But one thing I've really been kind of thinking about and talking about lately with some friends is just be authentic. And that's one of the things I've been learning as I've been doing Patreon podcast. Is I kind of started out, okay, I've got this these things nailed out that I'm going to cover, and kind of this almost not intentionally like this, not consciously like, oh, there's this image I want to present, but kind of subconsciously I was falling into this trap of there's this persona or something that I want to appear. And what I've been realizing as I've been doing this podcast and just kind of in general is I gotta just be authentic, and I gotta just be who I am. And if they like that, great, maybe they'll tune in. But I think I know what turns me off is when I can tell somebody's being fake. And I sure as heck don't want to be fake in anything that I do. So I guess that's what it comes down to, is just not trying to, there's this term called is like self-branding or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like kind of, everybody's, I'm probably using the wrong term, but it's there's this.
I think I know what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
Branding has different connotations.
Yeah, it does. But so there's this concept called like, oh, personal brand. That's what it is. It's what's your personal brand, and it's not so much that like I think the people who are, well, what it is personal brand to me is like, what's the image that you're putting out there on your social networks and all this stuff that you're on, and I've heard people talk about this is kind of the persona I choose for my personal brand, and that's fine, I guess, but for me I'm kind of like, well, I just want my personal. I don't want a personal brand. I just want to be a personal human being. I'm a personal person, And so that to me is what it comes down to. Is I want to just be authentic, whatever that means, and because if people don't like you for who you are, they're not going to like you for being fake. Is kind of the way I see it. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't brought up that you'd like to let those that are watching this or listening to this know?
Ooh. Nothing comes to mind. I'm sure you were going to give me the opportunity, but I could plug my my website.
That's usually what happens at this area. So.
Cool. All right. Well, there we go. Well, so I do a couple different podcasts, and as well as several other things. And if you're interested in finding out about that stuff, it's at breakroomstudios.com. Breakroom Studios is kind of the hub for my podcasts, and occasionally when I'm in when my creative ADD directs me towards drawing webcomics, then you might find that there as well. And yeah, so Breakroom, BREAK, breakroomstudios.com. And you can also follow me personally on Twitter at bovineright, which is probably the worst Twitter handle you could come up with. You're nodding your head in agreement. It's terrible. So, but you can find the links to all that at Breakroom Studios and link to all my different podcasts and websites and all that stuff there.
And of course, the Patreon podcast is patreonpodcast.com. Good stuff, good stuff. Well, I hate to say it, Chris, but, that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I know it's crazy. It's like, just time flies when you're having fun. That's the main thing. That's why I love doing these shows. It's entertaining, it's enjoyable, and, we get to talk to yourself and get to learn a little bit more about what makes Chris tick, and peering a little glimpse into the life that is the craziness that is your life. So
well, thank you so much for having me on. It was an honor to be the second geek in Two Geeks Talking, and let's do this again or something, or have you back on my show or something, because it's been a real blast.
No, most definitely. We'll definitely trade off and all that stuff. I'll just finish off the closing, and we'll go from there.
Right.
So that ends this episode of Two Geeks Talking, of course, with Patreon podcast creator, patreonpodcast.com, of course, breakroomstudios.com. Our guest today was Chris Cowan. I did say that right?
Yes, good job.
Okay. All right, good. Chris Cowan from those websites. And, of course, take a look at everything that he does, and I'm sure you'll be interested and enthralled as to what he's come up with, and I look forward to many more wonderful episodes from you in the future with whatever you decide to do. That being said, you can, of course, see all of our work for Two Geeks Talking on our website, tgtmedia.com. And you could go to our YouTube channel, which is probably how you're watching this, and or on your mobile device, which is youtube.com/tgtmedia. You can, of course, go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Two Geeks Talking, which is the word two, not the number two. Our Patreon page, if you want to support us for $1 a month, every little bit helps, because we've been doing this since 2008 with over 600 interviews, all free and all for you, with amazing, great, creative, and talented people, much like Chris. Our Patreon page itself is, of course, on patreon.com/Two Geeks Talking. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching to the show. I forgot, our iTunes is itunes.com. Search for Two Geeks Talking. And finally, tune in for another great episode with another great, talented, and creative person on Two Geeks Talking. I'm your host, Kurt Sasso, signing off.